The emergency room doors burst open just after midnight, and the sound of chaos flooded the hallway like a storm breaking through glass. Alarms screamed, stretchers rattled across the floor, and the sharp smell of antiseptic mixed with fear hung thick in the air. In the center of the commotion stood a quiet nurse named Elena Reyes, her hands steady but her eyes tired from another 14-hour shift. No one noticed her at first. In a place where voices were loud and tempers louder, Elena had learned long ago that the quiet ones were often invisible. Then it happened. Without warning, the chief surgeon stormed across the ER floor, his face red with fury, his reputation for cruelty already echoing through the hospital halls. In front of doctors, nurses, and a frightened patient, he grabbed a fistful of Elena's dark hair and yanked her backward with brutal force. The room froze. Machines kept beeping, but every human in the emergency room went silent. No one moved. No one spoke. It was the kind of moment that made time feel like it had stopped breathing. And what the quiet nurse did next would stun the entire emergency room. But before we continue, if you believe that kindness matters, that people deserve second chances, and that standing up for what's right can change lives, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach more people who need them. Elena Reyes had worked at St. Gabriel Medical Center for nearly 5 years, yet most people barely knew her name. She arrived early, stayed late, and rarely complained even when shifts stretched into exhaustion. Many assumed her silence meant weakness. Others simply didn't notice her at all. But silence, as life often proves, can hide incredible strength. The chief surgeon, Dr. Marcus Caldwell, was feared throughout the hospital. He was brilliant, yes, but his temper had become legendary. Nurses whispered about him in break rooms. Residents avoided eye contact when he walked by. Administrators tolerated his behavior because he saved lives and brought prestige to the hospital. In the cold arithmetic of reputation, skill often outweighed character. Tonight had been particularly brutal. A highway pileup had sent victims pouring into the ER like waves crashing onto shore. Blood, broken bones, and desperate families filled every corner of the department. Doctors raced from one trauma bay to another, shouting orders over the noise. Elena moved quietly between beds, checking vitals, adjusting 4 lines, comforting patients with the gentle steadiness that only experienced nurses develop. She had seen panic before, and she understood something many doctors didn't. Sometimes saving a life began with calming a terrified heart. But in trauma room 3, tension exploded. A young boy lay on the bed, unconscious after the crash. His oxygen levels were dropping fast. Elena had been monitoring his breathing when she noticed something wrong with the ventilator tubing. A small kink had formed near the connection point, restricting airflow. She moved quickly to fix it. Just as she reached for the tube, Dr. Caldwell stormed in, already furious from a failed surgery earlier that night. He saw Elena touching the equipment and instantly assumed she had caused the problem. That was when he grabbed her hair. The sudden pain shot through Elena's scalp as her head jerked backward. Gasps filled the room. A junior nurse dropped a tray of instruments that clattered loudly onto the floor. Dr. Caldwell shouted accusations, his voice echoing against the tiled walls, blaming Elena for the child's dropping oxygen levels. His anger burned so hot that he never noticed what Elena had already seen. The ventilator connection. The kink. The seconds ticking away. For a brief moment, Elena closed her eyes. Anyone watching might have thought she was overwhelmed, humiliated, broken. But inside her mind, something very different was happening. Her training, years of it, was calculating every second the boy had left before brain damage could begin. Without shouting back, without even acknowledging the humiliation, Elena reached forward with calm precision. She straightened the ventilator tube. Air rushed through the line. The monitor beep changed instantly. Oxygen levels began climbing. The entire room stared at the screen as the numbers stabilized. The boy's chest rose more evenly. The crisis that had been seconds from tragedy quietly disappeared. Dr. Caldwell slowly released his grip. For the first time that night, his voice vanished. But the moment wasn't over. Because Elena did something no one expected. She calmly turned around and looked directly at the chief surgeon. Not with anger. Not with fear. Just quiet, unwavering certainty. Then she gently pulled a small badge from the pocket of her scrubs and held it up. Most nurses carried standard hospital ID cards. Elena's badge was different. Under her name was a line of text almost no one in the ER had ever noticed. Former U.S. Navy combat medic. A murmur rippled through the room. Suddenly people remembered small details about Elena that had never quite added up. The way she stayed calm during the worst trauma cases. The way she could place an 4-line faster than most doctors. The way she never panicked when patients coded. She hadn't learned those skills in nursing school. She had learned them on battlefields. Years earlier, Elena Reyes had served in war zones where chaos was constant and mistakes cost lives instantly. She had treated wounded soldiers under gunfire. She had carried injured teammates across burning terrain. Compared to those memories, an angry surgeon grabbing her hair felt small. But the boy on the bed didn't feel small. His life mattered. That was why she had stayed focused. The silence in trauma room 3 grew heavier by the second. Dr. Caldwell looked around and realized something uncomfortable. Every person in the room had witnessed what happened. The nurses. The residents. Even the boy's frightened mother standing in the corner. And every one of them had just seen Elena save a life while being publicly humiliated. The hospital administrator, who had rushed in moments earlier after hearing the commotion, slowly stepped forward. His expression was no longer neutral. For years, complaints about Dr. Caldwell's behavior had been quietly buried under paperwork and excuses. But tonight something was different. Tonight the entire emergency room had seen the line crossed. And Elena had responded not with rage, but with professionalism. The boy's mother approached the bed with tears in her eyes as the monitors stabilized. She gripped Elena's hands and whispered gratitude so intense it made several nurses nearby wipe their eyes. Elena simply nodded and returned to her work, checking the child's pulse, adjusting medication levels, making sure the crisis truly had passed. She never mentioned the hair pulling. She never demanded an apology. Her focus stayed exactly where it always had been. On the patient. But something had changed in the room. The nurses who had once seen Elena as quiet now saw something else entirely. Strength. Discipline. Courage that didn't need to shout. Dr. Caldwell stood frozen longer than anyone expected. The man who had spent years commanding operating rooms suddenly looked unsure of himself. His authority had always come from fear and reputation. But respect was something different. And tonight, respect belonged to the quiet nurse. Word of the incident spread through the hospital faster than wildfire. By morning, nearly every department had heard the story. Not the version about a surgeon losing his temper. The version about a nurse who saved a child's life while staying calm under humiliation. In the days that followed, something surprising began to happen. Doctors started asking Elena for her opinion during trauma cases. Younger nurses began requesting to train under her during shifts. Even residents who once ignored her now watched closely as she worked, learning from the efficiency and composure she carried into every emergency. But the biggest change happened 2 weeks later. The hospital board held a meeting about conduct in the ER. For the first time in years, Dr. Caldwell was formally reprimanded. Mandatory leadership training was ordered, and the hospital implemented new protections for nursing staff. None of that had been requested by Elena. But her actions had made it impossible to ignore the truth. One quiet act of professionalism had changed an entire department. And as for Dr. Caldwell, the man who once ruled the ER through intimidation began slowly rebuilding his reputation in a very different way. Colleagues noticed he spoke more calmly now. He listened more. Sometimes he even asked nurses for input before making decisions. The transformation wasn't instant. But it started that night. Because sometimes the most powerful lesson a person can receive isn't delivered through anger or revenge. Sometimes it comes from witnessing dignity under pressure. Before we reach the end of this story, we have a small request. If this moment moved you in any way, please comment the word respect below. It helps us know these stories are reaching people who believe in compassion and courage. Months later, the young boy from the crash walked back into St. Gabriel Medical Center holding his mother's hand. His recovery had been remarkable. When he spotted Elena at the nurse's station, he ran forward and hugged her tightly. The quiet nurse who had once been invisible suddenly found herself surrounded by smiling staff. In that moment, Elena simply smiled. Because the truth she had learned long ago still held strong. Strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply does the right thing when everyone else is watching. And if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes kindness can change the world, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us how powerful compassion truly is. Because sometimes, the quietest person in the room carries the strongest heart of all.